If you had the power to destroy someone without ever touching them, would you do it? Even if that person once shared your bed? The night Manhattan slept under a quilt of glittering lights, the Quint penthouse stood like a silent fortress in the sky. Inside its floor-to-ceiling glass walls, a secret had already bloomed. A secret so brazen, it would soon explode into headlines and ruin reputations. Amara Quint, heir to the Quint media dynasty, had no idea that the sanctity of her own bedroom was about to become the battlefield of a war she never asked for. In the heart of her private study, Amara sat at her mahogany desk, reviewing final proofs for the weekend edition of the New York Chronicle, the flagship paper her late father built from ink and ambition. Her life was a masterpiece of control, polished, precise, with no room for mess. Her husband of 20 years, Julian Croft, had always been the warm counterbalance to her cool composure. Together, they were the city's power couple. She ruled media, he shaped skylines as a celebrated architect. But at 9:47 p.m., her phone buzzed. The sender was a name she recognized only faintly, a younger socialite from the fringes of her circle. The message was short, hesitant, and paired with a single image. "Amara, I'm so sorry to send you this, but you should know." She tapped the attachment. The air left her lungs. The photo was grainy, shot in low light, but the setting was unmistakable. Her bedroom. The reclaimed French vineyard wood headboard she'd personally chosen. The Calder mobile hanging by the window, a gift from Julian on their 15th anniversary. And in the center of the frame, lounging against her pillows, was a young woman Amara had never seen before. Raven hair, sculpted cheekbones, and a defiant pout. She wore nothing but Julian's favorite gray cashmere V-neck sweater, the one Amara had bought him in Scotland. In her hand, the woman held her phone, the reflection in the mirror showing her smirking into the camera as if daring the world to catch her. Amara's fingers tightened on her phone. Her pulse roared in her ears. This wasn't a mistake. This was deliberate. This woman wanted her to see it. She scrolled down. The image was posted on Instagram just 15 minutes ago, public for anyone to view. The caption? "Home sweet home." A slow, icy wave spread through Amara's chest. The sheer audacity. Julian was in Tokyo on business. Or so he claimed. Now the truth was sprawled across her Egyptian cotton sheets. Amara had handled scandals before, political cover-ups, celebrity affairs, but never her own. For 20 years, she had protected Julian's name as fiercely as her own. She had stood beside him at galas, smiled for cameras, weathered whispers. She had believed in the quiet intimacy of their marriage, the unspoken bond that they were each other's anchor. And now, he had brought someone else into their most private space. But it wasn't the betrayal alone that lit the fuse inside her. It was the public humiliation. The bedroom was sacred. And now, thanks to this smug intruder with a smartphone, it was viral bait waiting to happen. For anyone else, the smart move would be to delete the evidence, confront the husband in private, protect the family name. Amara Quint wasn't anyone else. She was the owner of the largest newspaper in the city. She understood the power of an image, the weight of a headline, and she had just been handed both. Her mind worked fast. She imagined the front page. Mistress makes herself at home in Quint penthouse. The photographs splashed across millions of breakfast tables. Social media melting under the heat of the scandal. The same audacity that woman had flaunted in her bedroom would be the rope she hung herself with. The humiliation would not belong to Amara. She reached for her intercom. "Elliot, I need you in my study, now." Elliot Hayes, her most trusted editor, appeared moments later, gray-haired, sharp-eyed, and loyal to the bone. One look at Amara's expression and he knew something seismic had shifted. "Clear tomorrow's front page," she said, sliding her phone across the desk. He studied the photo, eyebrows lifting slightly before his journalist's instinct kicked in. "Do you want this to run, as is?" "As is," Amara said, her voice low but edged with steel. "No blur, no euphemisms, full caption, and make sure the headline leaves no room for doubt." Elliot hesitated only a second. "This will detonate, Amara. Are you sure?" She met his gaze, her blue eyes glinting like ice under moonlight. She wanted to be seen. Let's make her unforgettable. As Elliot left to set the machine in motion, Amara turned back to the window. Below her, Manhattan stretched endlessly, glittering, oblivious to the war she had just declared. She could almost hear her father's voice. "In this business, you never get mad, you get headlines." Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from Julian. "Flight landed. Can't wait to see you. Dinner tomorrow?" Amara almost laughed. The gall. The arrogance. He didn't even know yet. Tomorrow he would wake up to find his betrayal not hidden in whispers, but screaming from every street corner, every smartphone, every TV screen. The world would know the man behind the architect's charm. And the mistress? She would learn what it meant to provoke a woman with a press at her fingertips. Amara closed her laptop, the front page layout already burning in her mind. Some women burned their husbands' clothes. She burned reputations. And in less than 12 hours, the city would be reading her vengeance over their morning coffee. Before Amara Quint was the iron-fisted media heiress Manhattan both feared and envied. She had been just a daughter. Of power, yes, but also of loneliness. Born into the gleaming world her father, Robert Quint, had built, she learned before she could walk that everything had a price. Her earliest memories weren't bedtime stories or trips to the park. They were newsroom visits, the smell of ink, the crackle of headlines being set, and the low, constant hum of deals being made behind closed doors. Her mother, Lillian, was beauty incarnate, elegant, poised, untouchable. But she was also emotionally distant, more comfortable on the charity circuit than in her daughter's bedroom. The Quint legacy was a crown, heavy even for a child, and Amara wore it whether she wanted to or not. By 16, she could quote ad revenue figures from memory and debate editorial strategy with her father's top editors. By 22, she'd graduated top of her class from Columbia Journalism School, not because she needed the credentials, but because she refused to be dismissed as just the boss's daughter. She wanted to earn her place at the table. That's where Julian came in. She met him at a benefit dinner for urban redevelopment, one of those evenings where champagne flowed like water and every handshake was a potential merger. He was magnetic in a way that didn't feel forced. A self-made architect whose designs were already reshaping skylines, Julian Croft had a way of making you believe he saw only you, even in a room full of power. For a woman whose life was scripted in headlines, that focus felt intoxicating. He didn't just court her, he listened. He wanted to know about her childhood in the shadow of the printing presses, her dreams for the Chronicle, the kind of stories she thought deserved ink. He didn't flinch at her wealth or her name. He said he admired her strength. They married after 2 years of whirlwind romance, their wedding the kind of event that clogged traffic and sold magazines. From the outside, they were perfect. The media queen and the visionary builder, crafting not just a life, but a city. Behind closed doors, though, Amara carried insecurities that her money and name couldn't shield. She wasn't blind. She knew she wasn't the wide-eyed 20-something she'd been when Julian first kissed her. At 46, she carried herself with elegance, but also with the quiet awareness of time passing. Manhattan's elite loved their wives polished but eternally youthful. And though Amara never chased trends, she saw how his eyes lingered on younger women at events. She told herself it was harmless, a man's passing glance. She buried the unease under charity boards, editorial meetings, and gala planning. She reminded herself that Julian had been with her through her mother's death, to her father's illness, and the brutal legal battles to secure her place as CEO after his passing. But cracks had begun to form years before the photograph. Late nights at the office turned into unexplained business trips. His phone, once left casually on the kitchen counter, was now locked with a passcode she didn't know. Conversations about the future shifted subtly, from we to I. And yet, Amara stayed silent. She'd grown up in a world where public image was currency, and scandal could bankrupt you faster than any market crash. The Quints didn't air their laundry. They incinerated it before anyone saw the stains. Her friends, what few she trusted, sometimes asked if she was happy. She'd smile, deflect, and say happiness was a luxury, but stability was everything. In truth, she feared the collapse of the life they'd built together. She feared being seen as the woman who couldn't hold her marriage, as though her husband's betrayal was a referendum on her worth. That fear was her weakness, and Julian had unknowingly stepped right on it. The day she received that photograph, the fear didn't disappear. It transformed. The quiet, aching dread that had kept her compliant turned into something sharper, cleaner. Rage. Not the chaotic, screaming kind that burns itself out, but the kind that crystallizes into resolve. The kind that plans, calculates, and waits for the perfect moment to strike. She thought back to her father's lessons, how he'd dismantled political campaigns with nothing more than a headline and timing so precise it felt surgical. "Information is a blade, Amara," he'd told her once. "Most people wave it around, hoping to scare. The smart ones? They wait until the point is pressed exactly where it will hurt the most." Julian had hurt her in the one place she'd never thought possible, her home. And now she would hurt him in the one arena where she was untouchable, public opinion. Still, as she sat in her penthouse study that night, she let herself remember. She remembered the way he used to look at her during those first years, as if she was the only thing in the room worth noticing. She remembered their nights on the terrace, sipping wine and dreaming up the kind of life they wanted, before the trappings of that life became chains. It wasn't all a lie. And that, perhaps, was the cruelest part. The woman in the photograph, young, smug, and bare-skinned under Julian's sweater, wasn't just an interloper. She was a reminder of what Amara could no longer be, no matter how much she tightened her jaw and squared her shoulders. For a fleeting second, that thought threatened to undo her. But Amara Quint did not allow herself the indulgence of self-pity. She'd been underestimated her entire life. By rivals, by her own board, by the men who thought her father had been the real brain behind the Chronicle. She had survived every attempt to sideline her. She would survive this, and more than that, she would win. The victory wouldn't be in screaming matches or divorce court. It would be in the cold, devastating efficiency of the press she commanded. The same press that had toppled mayors, CEOs, and foreign ministers. Julian would learn what it meant to betray a woman who understood exactly how to turn a personal wound into a public spectacle. And the mistress? Amara didn't even know her name yet. But she would. And when she did, that name would become synonymous with infamy. Outside, the city glittered, oblivious. Inside, Amara reached for her pen and began sketching out the rough draft of tomorrow's headline. The words flowed easily, each one slicing away what remained of her hesitation. This was no longer about heartbreak, it was about legacy. And she would defend hers with the most potent weapon she owned. Because in the world Amara Quint ruled, you didn't just tell the story, you decided how it would be remembered. The newsroom of the New York Chronicle never truly slept, but at midnight it thrummed with a different kind of electricity. Quieter, sharper, like the air before a lightning strike. Amara Quint's arrival was enough to tilt the entire atmosphere. Editors straightened their backs. Copywriters pretended not to watch, their eyes flicking toward her as she strode past in a black wool coat and heels that clicked with a rhythm of purpose. Elliot Hayes, her trusted editor-in-chief, had already gathered a skeleton crew in the glass-walled conference room. The photograph lay in the center of the table, printed on glossy paper, as if it were any other asset ready for the front page. But nothing about it was ordinary. Amara didn't sit immediately. She stood at the head of the table, scanning each face in the room. Seasoned reporters, photo editors, headline writers. "I want this on every newsstand in the city by dawn," she said, her voice calm but lethal. "This isn't gossip. This is a story about arrogance, entitlement, and disrespect, not just toward me, but toward the sanctity of a home." One young copy editor cleared his throat. "Ma'am, won't this be personal?" Amara fixed him with a cool stare. "It stops being personal when someone turns my bedroom into a prop for their vanity. She made it public. I'm simply giving it a bigger stage." There were no further objections. Elliot slid a mock-up toward her. The headline read, "Mistress makes herself at home in Quint penthouse." The subheader, "Exclusive photo sparks scandal inside one of Manhattan's most powerful households." Amara's eyes swept over it. "Good," she said, "but I want it tighter. Make the words cut." The headline team began scribbling alternates. "Power couple's marriage rocked by bedroom scandal." "Penthouse betrayal." "Mistress's brazen bedroom photo." She selected one and adjusted a comma herself, the red pen moving with surgical precision. In the world of media, she knew the difference between a story people read and one they couldn't look away from. While the newsroom set the presses in motion, Amara retreated to her office. Through the glass, she could see the hum of activity. phone calls being made to verify the photo's authenticity, layouts being adjusted to give the image prime real estate, social media managers scheduling the timed release for the 6 a.m. rush. This was not chaos. This was choreography. On her desk, her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Bold move. Expect blowback. No name, but she knew who it was. One of her father's old contacts. The kind of man who played both sides in a scandal because that was how you survived in this city. She typed back, "I'm counting on it." At 12:45 a.m., she stepped back into the conference room. "I want a sidebar with a profile on her," Amara said. "Find her name, her background, every public image she's ever posted. She wanted an audience. Let's make sure it's global." Elliot nodded, already pulling up a file. "Her name is Lila Marin, 26, freelance interior stylist, minor social media following, known in some influencer circles for posting provocative content." Amara absorbed the details, her mind mapping the shape of the story. Good. Frame it as a cautionary tale. Not just about infidelity, but about what happens when you mistake access for immunity. One of the senior reporters leaned forward. "You know Julian will come after us legally." Amara's lips curved into the faintest smile. Julian built his career on public opinion. He's about to learn how quickly it turns. By 1:30 a.m., the presses were rolling. The front page layout had been locked, the ink already sinking into thousands of sheets of paper that would soon be stacked on delivery trucks. In her years at the helm of the Chronicle, Amara had approved stories that toppled senators, dismantled corporate empires, and ended political careers. But never had she put her own life on page one. This time, she wasn't just a publisher. She was the headline. She returned to the penthouse before dawn, the city still cloaked in the gray hush of early morning. From her terrace, she could see the first delivery trucks making their rounds. Somewhere, in bodegas and coffee carts, her front page was being unfolded. Somewhere, commuters were pausing mid-sip of their lattes, leaning closer to read the caption under that photograph. She imagined Julian in his hotel suite in Tokyo, scrolling through his phone, the color draining from his face. She imagined Lila Marin refreshing her notifications, watching her follower count spike for all the wrong reasons. At 6:02 a.m., her phone rang. Julian's number. She let it go to voicemail. A moment later, a text. "What the hell have you done?" Amara set the phone down without replying. Instead, she poured herself a cup of coffee, black, no sugar. Across the room, the framed photo of her father watched from the wall. She lifted her mug toward it, a silent toast. By 8 a.m., the Chronicle's website had crashed twice from the flood of traffic. News stations were replaying the story, panelists speculating about the fallout for Julian's career, the stability of the Quint-Croft marriage, the young woman at the center of it all. The photo had been shared over 2 million times online, each repost carrying the same headline she had approved. By 9 a.m., paparazzi had camped outside the penthouse, flashes bouncing off the limestone facade. Amara stood at the window, watching them gather. Her pulse was steady. This was no accident. She had turned the lens around, forcing the players in this betrayal into the harshest possible light. And this was only the opening act. Because for all the noise the photograph had created, Amara knew the real damage would come next, when she decided which truths about Julian Croft would be fed to the press and in what order. She sipped her coffee, the city waking up to her story, and thought, if they wanted a spectacle, I'll give them history. In a luxury suite 30 floors above Tokyo's Shinjuku district, Julian Croft's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. At first, he thought it was the time difference, clients in New York calling about contracts. But when he saw the sheer number of notifications, missed calls, urgent texts, news alerts, his stomach tightened. He clicked the first link. There it was, splashed across the New York Chronicle front page. The photograph of Lila Marin, smirking in their bedroom, draped in his sweater. The headline screamed in bold type, "Mistress makes herself at home in Quint penthouse." Julian felt the blood drain from his face. This wasn't some gossip blog. This was the paper his wife owned. Amara had not just exposed him, she had declared war, and she had done it in the most public, humiliating way possible. "Julian?" Lila's voice floated from the other room. She padded in barefoot, wearing one of the silk robes he'd bought her. She was holding her phone, eyes wide. "Have you seen this? It's everywhere." Julian shot her a glare. Of course I've seen it. Do you have any idea what this does to my reputation, my clients, my firm? Lila crossed her arms, bristling. I didn't post it for this. It was supposed to be private. He barked a humorless laugh. Private? You put it on Instagram, Lila. You tagged the damn location. She flushed, defensive. I was careful. No names, no faces but mine. How was I supposed to know Amara would go nuclear? Julian raked a hand through his hair, pacing the suite. His mind was already in damage control mode. If he let this spiral, his architecture firm could lose millions in contracts. Investors hated scandal, especially the kind that made you look careless. She's not going to stop, he muttered. This isn't just about us. She's making an example out of you. Out of me? Lila's voice sharpened. I'm the one being humiliated here too, Julian. People are calling me names, sending threats. My brand deals are pulling out already. You think I wanted this? Julian stopped pacing, leveling her with a cold look. You wanted attention, Lila. Don't pretend otherwise. You've been dying to be seen in my world since the day we met. Well, congratulations, your headline news. She flinched, but quickly masked it with a scoff. Fine. So what's the plan? You're the genius. Fix it. Julian turned toward the window, the neon sprawl of Tokyo reflected in the glass. First, we get ahead of the story. We frame it as a smear campaign. Make Amara look vindictive. The more she looks like an angry wife using her paper as a weapon, the less credible she becomes. Lila hesitated. You think people will believe that? They will if we make them, Julian said. We'll give an exclusive to a rival paper, one of her competitors. Something sympathetic. We spin it as an invasion of privacy, maybe even defamation. Lawyers will eat it up. Lila perked up at the thought. And me? What do I say? Nothing. You disappear for a while. Stay off social media, keep your head down. Let me handle it. But Lila wasn't built for silence. She'd been fielding messages all morning. Friends, enemies, strangers, all of them glued to her feed. Every instinct told her that vanishing now meant losing the momentum she'd craved for years. Even if it was messy, scandal meant followers, and followers meant leverage. Still, she could see the storm brewing in Julian's expression, and for once, she decided to keep her arguments to herself. Across the ocean, in Manhattan, the fallout was spreading like wildfire. Morning talk shows were dissecting the headline, each panelist weighing in. Some praised Amara for her boldness. Others clutched their pearls at the public airing of private matters. The consensus? This was no ordinary society scandal. This was power against power, and the wife was winning. Julian's PR firm back in New York sent him a bullet-point list within the hour. Do not publicly attack Amara, it will backfire. Release a carefully worded statement expressing deep disappointment over the invasion of privacy. Emphasize commitment to work and clients. Avoid travel to New York until the initial frenzy dies down. Julian read the list twice, his jaw tightening. Avoid travel? Hide? That wasn't his style. He didn't get to where he was by retreating. He built skyscrapers in cities that said no. He bent billion-dollar deals to his will. But Amara, she was different. She didn't just know his weaknesses, she owned the microphone that could amplify them to the world. He thought back to their early years, the nights she'd sit across from him with that steady gaze, dissecting his pitches, offering ideas sharper than his own. He'd admired her then, even feared her a little. Somewhere along the way, he'd convinced himself she'd never use that power against him. He was wrong. Back in Tokyo, Lila scrolled through her DMs, a mix of insults and propositions. She couldn't help but notice the sudden spike in her followers, 20,000 overnight. It was intoxicating. She imagined brand deals, interview offers, maybe even reality TV interest. If she played it right, she could turn this disaster into a career launch. Julian, she said slowly, what if I don't disappear? What if I tell my side? Not the way Amara thinks, but he cut her off sharply. You'll do nothing without my approval. This isn't your arena, Lila. One wrong word and she'll have even more ammunition. Lila bit back her retort, but her mind was already spinning. She didn't like being told to fade into the background, not after she'd just been handed the biggest audience of her life. By evening, Julian had secured an interview slot with a London-based business journal known for its rivalry with the Chronicle. The plan was simple: present himself as the composed professional, blindsided by a vengeful spouse. Keep details vague. Frame Lila as a victim of a media witch hunt. But he knew Amara. She wouldn't let him control the narrative without a fight. If she had one photo, she probably had more. And if she decided to go public now, it meant she was holding something even bigger in reserve. That thought unsettled him more than he wanted to admit. As he sat in the quiet of the suite, Julian stared at the skyline, his reflection superimposed over Tokyo's endless lights. This wasn't just a PR crisis. It was a chess match, and Amara had just moved her queen into striking position. For the first time in years, Julian Croft wondered if he might be playing a losing game. And somewhere in New York, Amara was already planning her next move. The Monday after the headline dropped, Manhattan was a hive of speculation. Every society lunch, every boardroom meeting, every whisper at a Fifth Avenue boutique seemed to orbit around the same question. What will Amara Quint do next? Amara didn't feed the rumors. She let the city stew, the chatter grow, the news cycle chew on the scandal like it was its own meal. She knew the attention span of the public. Fury flared fast, but it could die just as quickly unless she gave them a second course. That opportunity arrived by way of the Van Alstyne Foundation Gala, one of the most exclusive annual events in New York. The guest list was a fortress of influence. Old money dynasties, billionaire tech founders, global political figures. Tickets weren't sold, they were extended, and only to those deemed worthy of being seen. Julian Croft had been on that list for years. Amara had too. This year, they were both still invited. And this year, the Chronicle had just been named the gala's primary media sponsor, a detail secured months before the scandal broke. It meant that Amara wouldn't just be attending, she'd be hosting the red carpet. When her assistant Claire reminded her of the date, Amara simply said, "Perfect." For the next week, she worked as usual, board meetings, editorial sign-offs, charity committee calls. But beneath the calm routine, she was orchestrating something else. She called her stylist, told her she wanted a gown that would stop the cameras mid-flash. She arranged her arrival with the precision of a military operation, down to which photographers would get the first full-body shot. Claire, who had seen Amara slice political careers in half with a headline, couldn't help but ask, "Is this about Julian?" Amara's smile was faint, unreadable. "This is about reminding the city who I am." Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, Julian was weighing his options. His London interview had aired, painting him as deeply disappointed in the Chronicle's abuse of media power. But the reaction had been mixed. Half the viewers saw a wronged husband. The other half saw a man scrambling to save face. When the Van Alstyne Gala appeared on his calendar, he hesitated. Public appearances were risky now. But skipping it? That would look like defeat. Worse, it would hand Amara the stage unopposed. Lila had no such hesitation. "We have to go," she insisted, perched on the edge of the hotel bed. "If we don't show up, she wins. If we do, we control the narrative." Julian wasn't sure about her definition of control, but the logic was sound. He booked the flights. By the time the night arrived, the steps of the Met, transformed for the gala, were a riot of flashbulbs and velvet ropes. Reporters called out names as limousines deposited New York's elite onto the crimson carpet. The Chronicle's own camera crew was front and center, broadcasting live. Inside the press tent, Amara was serene. She wore a gown of midnight silk, the bodice hand-embroidered with silver thread that caught the light like falling stars. Diamonds glinted at her ears, but it was the way she carried herself, shoulders back, gaze steady, that made every camera lean toward her. She gave short, controlled interviews about the foundation's work, the importance of arts funding, the Chronicle's ongoing commitment to public service. Not once did she mention the scandal. She didn't need to. The unspoken was louder than words. And then at precisely 8:12 p.m., the air shifted. A black town car pulled up. Julian emerged first, immaculate in a tailored tuxedo, his hand extended toward the car's interior, helping Lila step out. The cameras erupted. Lila wore a crimson gown that clung like a second skin, the color a calculated provocation. She smiled for the flashbulbs, but her eyes flicked toward Amara, searching for a reaction. Amara didn't move. She kept her expression neutral, her gaze level. Inside, her pulse was steady. This was the moment she'd prepared for. The reporters wasted no time. "Mrs. Quint, care to comment on your husband's arrival with Miss Marin?" She let the question hang in the air, then answered with a single cool sentence. "I'm here to support the arts, not to explain other people's taste." The soundbite hit like a spark in gasoline. Laughter rippled through the press tent. Even a few photographers lowered their cameras for a second, smirking. Julian's jaw tightened as he led Leila past. He paused just long enough to murmur, "Always knew you loved an audience." Amara's lips curved faintly. Better than hiding from one. Inside the gala, the social chess game intensified. Tables were arranged so that the Chronicle's delegation sat directly across from several key city planners, people Julian needed for upcoming projects. Amara greeted each of them warmly, ensuring every handshake, every exchange happened in full view. Leila, clearly unused to this level of scrutiny, clung to Julian's arm, her earlier confidence thinning under the weight of stares and whispered conversations. The red dress that had seemed so daring outside now felt like a target. Over dinner, Amara stayed focused on her table, laughing at a philanthropist's joke, discussing a museum restoration project. But she was aware of Julian watching her. Aware that every moment she appeared composed chipped away at the vindictive wife image he'd tried to sell. Midway through the program, an announcer took the stage to recognize major sponsors. "We'd like to thank the New York Chronicle for their generous support," the host said, "and especially our publisher, Amara Quint." Applause filled the hall. Amara rose gracefully, acknowledging the crowd. The spotlight found her, casting Julian and Leila into shadow. It was a small moment, but the symbolism was unmistakable. In this room, she was the one with power. When the evening ended and guests began filtering out, the photographers were still waiting. Julian made the mistake of stopping for a brief statement. "I hope we can all move past recent distractions," he began. Before he could finish, Amara stepped past him toward her car. "Distractions fade," she said, not looking back, "but legacies remain." The quote was on every gossip site by morning. For Julian, the gala had been meant as damage control. For Amara, it had been a reminder, to him, to Leila, to the city, that she wasn't just part of the story. She was the one writing it. The morning after the gala, Julian Croft sat in his office overlooking the East River, his coffee untouched. The city's skyline stretched before him, pristine and unbothered, but inside his thoughts churned. The event was supposed to be a chance to reclaim some control. Instead, Amara had stolen every headline without even mentioning his name. Leila stormed in, phone in hand. "Have you seen this?" she demanded, thrusting the screen toward him. It was a gossip blog post, side-by-side photos from the gala, Amara in her midnight gown, Julian with Leila in crimson, and a poll asking readers who owned the night. The results weren't close. 87% voted for Amara. "She's turning this into a popularity contest," Leila fumed. "And we're losing." Julian leaned back in his chair, studying her. "This isn't about popularity. It's about credibility. She's using her paper to paint herself as untouchable. If we want to win, we have to hit her where it hurts." "And where's that?" Leila asked, folding her arms. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he opened a folder on his desk, one that had been delivered by a private investigator earlier that morning. "Here," he said, sliding it across to her. Inside were printouts of property records, corporate filings, and snippets of old Chronicle articles. Leila skimmed them, brow furrowing. "So, she owns buildings, companies, stock. This isn't exactly scandal material." Julian's eyes narrowed. "Not yet, but if we dig deep enough, maybe we find a conflict of interest, something she's buried in the Chronicle's coverage. If we can prove she used the paper to protect her own business deals, it's not just gossip, it's ethics. That's the kind of thing that can shake her empire." Leila's lips curved slowly. "And if we can't find anything, then we manufacture it," Julian said flatly. She raised an eyebrow. "Dangerous." "So is crossing Amara," he replied. But she fired the first shot. They began assembling a small, trusted team, an old PR consultant who specialized in reputation warfare, a data analyst who could comb through years of financial disclosures, and a disgruntled former Chronicle employee who claimed Amara had iced him out after a disagreement on a major story. By midweek, they had a plan. Leak whispers to a rival paper suggesting that Amara had buried a damning report on one of the Chronicle's largest advertisers. It didn't matter if it was true at first. The seed of suspicion would be enough to make people question her integrity. But Leila, who had been sitting in on the meetings, began to notice something. The more they dug into Amara's world, the more walls they hit. Records were clean, Investments were diversified and transparent. Every Chronicle editorial decision had layers of documentation. It was as if she had built her life expecting someone to come looking. On Thursday night, Julian sat alone in his study, staring at the latest report from his investigator. It wasn't a smoking gun. It wasn't even a spark. Just a timeline of Amara's activities in the months before the scandal. Meetings, charity events, public speeches. But one entry caught his eye. 2 weeks before the photo surfaced, Amara had quietly met with a well-known political fixer in a private club downtown. No record of what was discussed. No photos. Just a name and a date. Julian's instincts prickled. "Why meet with him?" he muttered. The fixer, Leonard Voss, was infamous in certain circles for making inconvenient problems disappear. If Amara had brought him in, it meant she wasn't just reacting to the affair. She had been planning something bigger before it even became public. The thought unsettled Julian more than he cared to admit. If she'd been 3 moves ahead back then, where was she now? Meanwhile, Lila had her own agenda. She was growing restless with Julian's behind-the-scenes strategy. The scandal had given her a platform, and she hated wasting it on quiet scheming. That night, without telling Julian, she accepted an invitation to appear on a popular daytime talk show. The producers promised a sympathetic edit. Let her cry a little, play the role of the misunderstood other woman. It was risky, but Lila believed if she could sway public opinion, she wouldn't have to hide in Julian's shadow anymore. The next morning, her segment aired. She wore soft pastels, her makeup minimal, her voice trembling just enough to sound authentic. "I never meant to hurt anyone," she told the host. "Julian and we connected. I thought his marriage was over and everything but paperwork." She didn't name Amara outright, but the implication was clear. The wife was cold, distant, more in love with her empire than her husband. Julian saw the interview while scanning morning news alerts. His phone buzzed almost instantly. Messages from associates, clients, even his lawyer. Most were some version of the same sentiment. What the hell is she doing? When Lila walked into his office that afternoon, still flushed from the attention, Julian's expression was icy. "Do you have any idea how much harder you've just made this?" "I humanized us," she insisted. "People saw the real me." "They saw a pawn who can't follow instructions," he snapped. "You've given Amara exactly what she wants, proof you can't resist the spotlight. She'll use this." Lila's chin lifted stubbornly. "Maybe I want the spotlight. Maybe I'm tired of hiding while you play chess with her. I'm not afraid of Amara." Julian's voice dropped, low and sharp. "Then you're a fool." For the rest of the day, he avoided her, focusing instead on a new angle. If Leonard Voss was involved, maybe the fixer had information that could be turned against Amara. He made a discreet call, arranging a meeting. That night, under the dim lights of a private midtown bar, Julian slid into a booth across from Voss. The older man's expression was unreadable as he sipped his scotch. "I hear you've been working with my wife," Julian said. Voss's mouth quirked. "Ex-wife soon, from what I gather." Julian ignored the jab. "What did she hire you for?" Voss leaned back. "Confidentiality's my business. But I'll tell you this, she's not playing to win the battle. She's playing to own the whole board. And from where I'm sitting, you're already boxed in." Julian's hand tightened around his glass. "Meaning?" "Meaning," Voss said, setting down his drink. "By the time you figure out her end game, it'll be too late to stop it." The words followed Julian back to his apartment, echoing long after he turned off the lights. Somewhere in the dark, he realized something that made his stomach sink. Amara wasn't reacting to his mistakes. She had been building this trap for years. Amara Quint sat in the glass-walled corner office of the New York Chronicle, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across her desk. In front of her was a stack of reports, each one a piece of a puzzle she'd been assembling for over a year. To the outside world, the scandal consuming the city looked like an emotional reaction, a wronged wife striking back in a fit of public humiliation. That's exactly what she wanted them to believe. The truth was far more calculated. 12 months earlier, Amara had received an anonymous tip about irregularities in a major construction project, one of the city's largest urban renewal contracts. The developer, Croft Urban Design, Julian's firm. She hadn't confronted him. She hadn't even hinted that she knew. Instead, she quietly assigned her most discreet investigative team to dig. What they found was damning. Overbilled expenses, falsified safety inspections, kickbacks to city officials. And though the paper had enough evidence to run the story months ago, Amara held it back. Timing was everything. If she'd published then, it would have been a standard business scandal. Messy, but survivable. By waiting, by letting Julian believe he was untouchable, she could align the personal and professional betrayals into a single, devastating blow. And then Lila Marin had walked right into her home and handed her the perfect ignition spark. Amara's intercom buzzed. Claire's voice came through. "Leonard Voss is here to see you." "Send him in," Amara said, setting aside the reports. The political fixer stepped in, his suit impeccable, his expression as unreadable as ever. He took the bait, Voss said without preamble, lowering himself into the chair opposite her. "Julian?" Voss nodded. "Met with me last night. Tried to figure out what you hired me for. He's nervous." "He should be." Amara leaned back in her chair. "Has our City Hall contact confirmed the audit release date?" "End of next week. It'll hit right when the second phase of his waterfront project is set to break ground." Amara smiled faintly. "Good. By the time the public connects the dots between the construction fraud and the man in that photograph, he'll be finished." Voss tilted his head. "And the Mistress?" "She's already destroying herself," Amara said. "All I have to do is give her rope." In another part of the city, Lila was busy with exactly that. Against Julian's orders, she had accepted invitations to 2 more talk shows and was in negotiations for a podcast interview. She was reveling in the attention. Free dinners, designer gifts sent by brands hoping to ride the wave of her notoriety. What she didn't realize was that every word she spoke, every half-truth she offered about Amara's marriage, was being meticulously archived by the Chronicle's legal team. When the time came, they'd use her contradictions to shred her credibility in the court of public opinion. That evening, Amara hosted a dinner at her penthouse. The guest list was small but powerful. A senior deputy mayor, a prominent real estate columnist, and 2 of the city's top prosecutors. Over seared sea bass and Bordeaux, the conversation danced between policy and politics. But under the surface, every exchange was strategic. By the end of the night, she had secured 3 quiet commitments. The deputy mayor would push for a public review of all Croft urban design contracts, the columnist would run an urban corruption exposé timed with the audit, and the prosecutors would be ready to comment on possible criminal charges. She didn't need to twist arms. Everyone at the table knew a sinking ship when they saw one, and Julian Croft was about to spring a leak the size of Manhattan. Across town, Julian was starting to feel it. His assistant handed him a folder that morning containing termination letters from 2 major clients. Officially, they were pausing their projects. Unofficially, they didn't want their brand tied to a man who was the punchline of every late-night comedy monologue. When he called to smooth things over, they were polite but firm. "We just can't weather the PR storm, Julian. Maybe once things settle." But they both knew settle meant never. That night, he confronted Lila. "Do you understand what's happening? She's not just making me look bad, she's dismantling everything I've built." Lila rolled her eyes. "So what? You'll start over, you've got money." He slammed his hand against the counter. "It's not just about money. My name is my currency. Without it, I'm nobody." The outburst startled her into silence. Julian realized then that Lila didn't get it, didn't grasp the depth of the war Amara was waging. Back at the Chronicle, Amara watched as the final proofs for next Sunday's edition rolled in. The lead story wasn't about her marriage, or even the Mistress. It was about corruption in city construction contracts. The headline didn't name Julian outright, but the details made it impossible not to connect the dots. She knew he'd recognize the precision of the hit. The Mistress scandal had weakened his image, made him an easy target. Now the professional blow would land with maximum impact. Before leaving the office, she sent a short email to her investigative team. Phase 2 approved. Proceed as planned. The next morning, the first leak hit the airwaves. A rival news station, fed by one of Amara's quiet allies, reported that a major New York developer was under scrutiny for financial misconduct. They didn't have the evidence yet, but speculation was enough to send Julian's investors into panic. By the afternoon, his phone was blowing up again, this time with calls from lawyers. He sat in his office, staring out at the water, feeling the noose tighten. For years, he'd believed his marriage to Amara was a strategic alliance, a merger of power. Now he saw it for what it really was, a partnership with someone who could destroy him more efficiently than any competitor. Somewhere in the city, Amara poured herself a glass of wine and stepped out onto her terrace. The skyline glittered in the distance, each light a reminder of the city she knew how to command. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about control. About removing a liability from her orbit before it could drag her down. She had spent her life building an empire that no man could touch. Now she was proving that no man could tear it down either. And Julian? He was just the first to learn what happened when you underestimated Amara Quint. Sunday morning arrived with the kind of tension New York thrived on. Before the coffee had even brewed in most kitchens, the front page of the New York Chronicle was already setting the city on fire. The headline was surgical in its precision. City's skyline at risk. Audit uncovers irregularities in Croft urban design projects. The article never mentioned the Mistress, never mentioned Amara, but anyone with a pulse and a memory of the bedroom photograph could connect the dots. Page 3 carried a detailed breakdown. Overbilled millions, safety inspection failures, city officials on the take. There were infographics showing timelines that just happened to overlap with the scandal's hottest headlines. The placement was deliberate. It told the public, this isn't just about a man who betrayed his wife. This is about a man who betrayed the city. By 8 a.m., the story had been picked up by every major outlet in the country. Television anchors discussed it with grave faces. Financial analysts debated the fallout on morning shows. On social media, hashtags like Croft corruption and Quint strikes again trended side by side. At the Chronicle offices, Amara stood at the back of the newsroom, watching the controlled chaos unfold. She didn't need to issue statements. The reporting spoke for itself. Elliot Hayes, her editor-in-chief, approached quietly. They're saying 2 city council members are already calling for a full suspension of Croft's contracts. Good, Amara said simply. The more official it becomes, the harder it is for him to spin. Across town, Julian Croft's apartment was a war zone of phones ringing, assistants shuffling in and out, and his legal team frantically drafting responses. He sat at the head of his dining table, the Chronicle spread open in front of him. This is a hit job, his lead attorney said, pointing at the paper. They've been building this for months. We can challenge the audit, delay hearings. Julian's voice cut in, sharp. Delay? That's your big strategy? The city's already treating me like I'm guilty. My investors are walking. Clients are freezing projects. If I don't flip the narrative now, I'm done. From the couch, Lila spoke without looking up from her phone. Maybe it's time to just settle. Cut your losses. Julian turned on her, his tone ice. You think this is just about money? This is my life's work. She's not just taking my business. She's erasing my name. But privately, he knew Lila's suggestion had merit. Amara wasn't leaving him a single exit that didn't involve surrender. By noon, Amara's strategy had taken root in every corner of the city's consciousness. Radio hosts were mocking Julian's Mistress phase as a distraction from deeper corruption. Editorials praised the Chronicle for holding even its own circle accountable, a phrase Amara had planted via a discreet conversation with a sympathetic columnist. It wasn't just about destroying Julian, it was about reinforcing her own brand as the incorruptible watchdog. At 1 p.m., Amara's phone buzzed with a call from the deputy mayor. You've lit a fire, he said. We're announcing a formal review tomorrow. Public hearing, live coverage. She didn't smile, but her voice carried quiet satisfaction. Transparency is important. Meanwhile, Julian's PR consultant tried to salvage the situation by arranging a press conference. The plan: position Julian as the victim of a politically motivated smear, paint the Chronicle's reporting as biased, and hint at legal action against the city for breach of contract. It might have worked if Lila hadn't decided to make herself part of the show. As Julian stood at the podium, the glare of cameras hot on his face, Lila appeared at his side, dressed in a pale suit that was meant to evoke dignity. But reporters didn't care about dignity. They cared about drama. Miss Marin, one shouted, do you believe the allegations against Mr. Croft are true? Her hesitation was brief but fatal. I believe people will twist anything for their own agenda. The soundbite was instantly weaponized online. Memes paired her line with photos of the bedroom scandal, mocking the hypocrisy. Within hours, people will twist anything became a sarcastic refrain attached to everything from crooked skyscraper photos to shaky bridges. At the Chronicle, Amara watched the footage with a kind of detached amusement. "She just made my point for me," she told Elliot. The next day's papers carried side-by-side images, Julian looking tense at the podium, Lila glancing uncertainly at reporters, and Amara arriving at a charity luncheon in a cream suit, smiling as if the storm wasn't even hers. The contrast was brutal. By midweek, the city's Department of Buildings announced it was halting all active Croft urban design projects pending investigation. Stock prices for his publicly traded partners plummeted. Several employees resigned, citing ethical concerns. Julian spent his days on back-to-back calls with lawyers, his nights staring out at the skyline he'd once shaped. The power he'd wielded, commissions, influence, respect, was slipping through his fingers faster than he could grasp. Lila, meanwhile, found the invitations drying up. The brands that had flirted with her notoriety were now backing away, afraid of being tied to a corruption scandal. She blamed Julian, but deep down, she knew Amara had played her perfectly, feeding her just enough rope to hang her own reputation. On Friday evening, Amara received a text from an unknown number. "You win. Just tell me what you want." She stared at it for a long moment before replying, "It's not about what I want. It's about what you deserve." Then she set the phone down and returned to her dinner, the city outside her windows glowing in the twilight. The takedown was complete, but Amara knew better than to think the game was over. Because in New York, victory was never permanent. You had to defend it every single day. And Amara Quint had no intention of ever giving Julian Croft or anyone else the chance to rise again. The hearing room at City Hall was packed to suffocation. Rows of reporters jostled for position, their cameras poised, the air thick with the scent of overbrewed coffee and the metallic tang of anticipation. The Croft Urban Design Corruption Inquiry had officially gone public. And though the city had hosted countless hearings over the years, everyone knew this one was different. This wasn't just about zoning violations or budget overruns. This was about power, betrayal, and the slow, methodical dismantling of a man who had once been untouchable. Julian Croft sat at the long table in front, flanked by two attorneys. He wore a navy suit that had cost more than most people's rent, but the fit didn't disguise the toll of the past weeks. Faint shadows under his eyes, the tightness in his jaw. Lila Marin was nowhere in sight. After her last disastrous public appearance, she'd been told, in no uncertain terms, to stay home. Amara arrived 10 minutes before the session began. She didn't need to be there. She wasn't a witness, wasn't under any obligation, but she understood the power of presence. The moment she walked in, the room shifted. Conversations stuttered, camera lenses swiveled, and every flashbulb seemed to find her in the crowd. She took a seat halfway back, where she could see everything without appearing to demand the spotlight. Claire sat beside her, tablet in hand, ready to field incoming updates from the Chronicle newsroom. The proceedings began with the chairperson reading the audit's findings. Pages upon pages of irregularities, false certifications, and suspiciously inflated invoices were entered into the record. The numbers alone were damning, but the accompanying photographs, crumbling infrastructure on projects that had passed inspection, drove the point home. Julian's attorneys objected repeatedly, arguing the evidence was circumstantial or taken out of context, but every objection was overruled. At one point, a council member leaned forward, fixing Julian with a cold stare. "Mr. Croft, can you explain why your company billed the city for structural reinforcements that engineers later confirmed were never installed?" Julian's response was measured, but his voice carried the strain of someone treading water in a storm. "I can't speak to the day-to-day operations of every site. My team." "Your team answers to you," the council member interrupted, "and the city answers to its taxpayers." The exchange was clipped for the evening news, playing on repeat with captions that left little room for sympathy. Amara watched it all without a flicker of emotion. She didn't need to intervene. The system, once slow and cumbersome, was moving exactly as she'd intended. All she had done was set the first domino. Midway through the session, her phone buzzed with a message from Elliot. Our exposé just hit the wire. National syndication by morning. It was the final layer of her strategy. A comprehensive Chronicle investigation tying the audit's findings to a larger network of political favoritism, sweetheart deals, and behind-the-scenes trades. While other outlets had focused on the scandal in isolation, Amara's paper presented it as part of a sweeping pattern of corruption, one that reached deep into City Hall. The brilliance of it was that Julian wasn't the sole villain. By broadening the narrative, the Chronicle made the story too big to be dismissed as a personal vendetta. Politicians scrambled to distance themselves. Allies evaporated overnight. Julian's lead attorney called for a recess. As they huddled, Amara caught the briefest flicker of Julian's gaze in her direction. There was no anger now, no smugness, only a kind of grim acknowledgement. He knew. The hearing resumed, and by late afternoon, the council voted unanimously to suspend all Croft urban design contracts pending further investigation. The motion passed to a smattering of applause from the public seating. Outside, the press swarm was immediate, microphones thrust forward, questions flying. Mrs. Quint, do you feel vindicated? Amara paused on the steps, the winter light glinting off the pin at her lapel. I feel hopeful, she said. Hopeful that our city is committed to transparency and accountability, values the Chronicle will always stand for. It was a masterstroke, speaking as a citizen and publisher, not as a wronged spouse. By refusing to make it personal, she made it universal. The soundbite led the evening broadcasts. Across the river, in a dim apartment Julian had begun using as a crash pad, the TV played her statement on loop. Lila sat curled on the couch, scrolling through her phone with a scowl. She's everywhere, she muttered. It's like she's untouchable. Julian didn't answer. He was staring at the floor, the weight of it all settling over him. The contracts were gone, investors were gone, and soon the city would likely file charges. The worst part wasn't losing the business. It was knowing that Amara had done it without ever raising her voice, without a single public outburst. She had destroyed him with precision and made it look like civic duty. That night, Amara returned to her penthouse. From the terrace, she could see the lights of the city flicker like a living map. Claire joined her, handing over a glass of wine. Claire said softly. Amara took a sip, her gaze steady on the skyline. No, she said. It's only finished when the lesson is learned. Claire hesitated. And if he doesn't learn it? Amara's lips curved, just barely. Then he becomes a cautionary tale, and those last forever. Below, the city pulsed on, unaware of the quiet victory taking shape above it. Julian Croft might still be breathing, but in every way that mattered, in influence, in respect, in the legacy he had tried to build, he was already gone. 2 weeks after the City Hall hearing, the snow began to fall over Manhattan, dusting the streets in white. The city was deep in the holiday season, but beneath the cheer, the aftershocks of the Croft scandal still rippled. Julian Croft had officially stepped down as CEO of Croft Urban Design. The statement, issued by his lawyers, cited a desire to focus on personal matters. Everyone knew better. Without contracts, investors, or credibility, he had no company left to lead. Lila Marin, once the darling of scandal blogs, had quietly retreated from the public eye. Her last Instagram post, a filtered photo of a cappuccino, was weeks old, the comment section filled with equal parts derision and pity. Amara Quint, however, was everywhere. The New York Chronicle subscriber base had surged. National outlets sought her commentary on ethics in media and corporate accountability. Invitations poured in for panels, conferences, and high-profile dinners. And now, she was about to deliver the closing act. The annual Chronicle Charity Gala was her signature event, a night that combined philanthropy with power networking, drawing a guest list that rivaled the Met Gala in influence. This year, the beneficiary was a new urban housing initiative. Amara had chosen the theme herself, Foundations That Last. The symbolism was intentional. When the night arrived, the ballroom of the Astoria Grand gleamed under crystal chandeliers. Guests mingled in tuxedos and gowns, champagne flutes in hand, the hum of conversation, a constant undertone. At the center of it all, Amara moved like a queen in her court. Calm, radiant, untouchable. She wore a deep emerald gown that made her eyes seem even sharper, her hair swept into a sleek chignon. She greeted each guest warmly, listening more than she spoke, but every handshake, every laugh was calculated. This was her arena. As dinner was served, the lights dimmed slightly, signaling the evening's speeches. The MC introduced her with the kind of reverence reserved for heads of state. Applause swelled as she stepped onto the stage, the spotlight following her. She began with gratitude, thanking donors, praising the cause. But halfway through, her tone shifted, the warmth tempered with steel. In recent months, she said, her voice carrying clearly across the room, our city has been reminded of an essential truth, that what we build must be strong enough to endure storms. Not just physical storms, but storms of integrity, of ethics, of trust. The audience listened, rapt. They knew what she was alluding to. I have always believed, she continued, that legacies are not made in moments of triumph, but in how we respond to moments of challenge. Some see those moments as endings. I see them as opportunities to rebuild, to reaffirm, to rise higher. A subtle murmur passed through the crowd. She let the pause linger before delivering the final strike. Tonight, as we commit ourselves to building foundations that last, let us remember, a structure without integrity will always collapse, no matter how tall it stands. The applause was thunderous. Cameras flashed. In living rooms across the city, viewers watching the gala's live stream recognized the precision of the statement. She had buried Julian Croft not with accusations, but with a universal truth. Backstage, Claire handed her a glass of water. You ended it, she murmured. Amara smiled faintly. No, I finished it. The next morning's headlines crowned her victory. The Chronicle ran a photo of her on stage under the headline, Quint calls for integrity in building our city's future. Rival outlets, once skeptical of her motives, echoed the praise. Editorials lauded her for rising above personal grievance to champion public good. Julian, meanwhile, packed up the last of his belongings from the company's headquarters. The office felt smaller now, stripped of its art, its awards boxed and ready for storage. As he stepped into the elevator, he caught his reflection in the mirrored wall. A man no one feared anymore. Lila had already left the city. The gossip blogs said she was taking time for herself. Somewhere on the West Coast. Julian didn't care. The truth was, she'd been a liability from the start. That night, alone in his rented apartment, he turned on the TV just in time to see Amara being interviewed on a primetime news show. She spoke about the housing initiative, about accountability, about the importance of leaders who serve the public, not themselves. She never said his name. She didn't have to. When the segment ended, Julian turned off the screen and sat in the silence. He finally understood what Leonard Voss had meant weeks ago, about playing for the whole board. Amara hadn't just taken his queen. She'd removed every piece, one by one, until there was nothing left to move. In her penthouse, Amara stood by the window, looking out over the city she loved. The skyline was clear against the winter night, every tower a testament to ambition, and a reminder that not all ambition was built to last. Claire entered quietly. Another award nomination, she said, placing a folder on the desk. Journalism excellence for the Croft investigation. Amara glanced at it, then back at the city lights. File it, she said. We have work to do. Because for her, this wasn't the end of a personal war. It was proof of something larger, that power could be wielded with precision, that dignity could coexist with victory, and that the strongest foundations were built not from concrete, but from principle. And somewhere, deep in the hum of the city below, the unspoken message carried, betray Amara Quint, and you will not just lose. You will be erased. So the story has ended, my wonderful friends. Are you still here with me right now? If you are, that means something in this journey has touched your heart. Maybe in a way you didn't expect. And if it did, then let's take a deep breath together and look at what it's really telling us. Life will hand us betrayal, loss, and storms we never saw coming. But remember, storms don't break the strongest trees, they reveal them. Amara's story isn't just about revenge. It's about choosing dignity over chaos, patience over impulse, and building a foundation so strong that no one can shake it. There's an old saying in heterodox thought, the wound is the place where the light enters you. Sometimes, the pain we wish had never happened is the exact thing that transforms us into who we're meant to be. Maybe your Amara moment is still ahead of you, or maybe you're in the middle of it right now. Don't rush to fight in the mud. Rise so high they can't reach you. Heal so fully that their memory no longer stings. And when the time comes, let your actions speak so loudly that you never have to shout. If you felt that shift inside while listening, I'd love for you to share your thoughts in the comments, because your voice might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And if you believe in stories that remind us we can survive anything, that we can come out stronger, wiser, and more unshakable than ever, then please give this video a like, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel so we can keep walking through these journeys together. You're not just watching, you're part of this family now. And in this space, we don't just survive, we rebuild stronger.